Hello, thank you for joining us. We begin our report with a new indictment in the election interference case against former President Trump. The superseding indictment filed by special counsel Jack Smith maintains the 4 counts against Trump that he previously faced, including conspiracy to defraud the United States. But in its design, it takes into account last month's Supreme Court ruling on the case. The court's conservative majority ruled that presidents and former presidents are immune from criminal prosecution for official acts that they take during their presidency. To help us understand just how it takes into account that Supreme Court ruling, we're joined by CBS News legal contributor and Loyola Law School professor Jessica Levinson. Jessica, it's good to be with you again. How is this indictment different from the initial indictment, and is essentially Jack Smith doing the judge's work for her?
Well, he's hoping that he's doing the judge's work for her in the sense that this actually is not hugely different from the indictment that he first brought forward before the immunity decision, before the decision in that other case dealing with what the obstruction statute really meant. And so for me, the big takeaway here is Jack Smith saying, I see your immunity decision. I see your decision narrowing the scope of the obstruction statute, and I'm coming forward with something that looks substantially similar. All of the charges are still there. All 4 charges remain. Some of the allegations dropped, those that I think much more clearly, according to the Supreme Court's roadmap, fell within those core presidential functions where a majority of the court said, no, there's immunity. But what Jack Smith is certainly hoping for is that Judge Chutkan looks and says, this is about right to me. I think you're going forward with just those allegations that you can bring. He doesn't want her to do a lot of work here and say yes to these, no to these.
Now, Jessica, as we discussed before, there is this category of behaviors of a president where the Supreme Court ruled a president has presumed or presumptive immunity. Those are more tricky. Those will require some time to figure out. Does Jack Smith help the judge or have a take on those category of actions?
Well, he does. And what he's hoping is that he's moving forward on those allegations that fall within bucket number 3, which is no immunity from prosecution. As you know, and as we got to talk about when that decision came out, the court created 3 categories. Just the things the president can do, core presidential functions, absolute immunity, go home, that's it. And then that middle bucket, official acts, where there's a presumption of immunity, and then finally, unofficial acts, no immunity. What Jack Smith did here is really try and say, everything that I'm bringing to you, Judge Chutkan, it falls within bucket number 3 of no immunity, or frankly, some of the kind of wobblers where I do think we have to acknowledge that she has work to do here. She's the first trial court judge in our nation who is going to be applying that immunity standard. And I don't know that she's going to let all of these allegations move forward.
And then very briefly, Jessica, what happens next? And does anything happen next of any note before the election?
Well, that depends on Judge Chutkan. And of course, what happens after the election depends on all of us, the voters. But in terms of what happens next, I mean, Judge Chutkan is moving this case. She's going to look at the allegations. The defense obviously will file their own argument. Then they will say much of what's here actually does fall within the immunity decision. But it's really now up to Judge Chutkan to sort, and that will determine what shape this case moves forward. Again, big takeaway here is that Jack Smith is saying, I saw what the Supreme Court did, and I can basically move forward with my original case.
Jessica Levinson, very helpful as always. Thank you very much, Jessica. Now to the Middle East, where we're learning more about a hostage rescue operation in Gaza. The Israeli military reports they've freed 52-year-old Qaid Farhan al-Hadi while searching underground tunnels. Members of special forces came upon a room 25 feet below the surface in southern Gaza. Al-Hadi is the 8th hostage to be rescued by Israeli forces since the start of the war. 100 hostages remain in Gaza, at least 30 of whom Israeli authorities presume to be dead. Al-Hadi is in stable condition at an Israeli hospital. And as we reported Monday, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees, or UNRWA, claims Israeli evacuation orders have disrupted distribution of more than 1 million oral doses of the polio vaccine in Gaza. UNICEF says the first case of the virus there in 25 years was confirmed in a 10-month-old girl last week. The World Health Organization reports 99% of Gazans were vaccinated for polio prior to the war. Now only 86% of residents have been inoculated. CBS News foreign correspondent Imtiaz Tayeb has more from Tel Aviv. Imtiaz?
Well, John, the rescue by Israeli forces of Mr. al-Hadi is being described here in Israel as nothing short of miraculous. But as we find out more, it's starting to look like it was something of an accident. We understand that Israeli soldiers were in a Hamas tunnel, combing through it, looking for clues, looking for Hamas fighters, and they came upon a room in which they found Mr. al-Hadi. Now, there were no Hamas guards there, and he was by himself, but this room was around 25 yards below the surface. Now, we understand that he was taken to the surface, for lack of a better phrase, where he was then put onto an Israeli military helicopter and taken to hospital. Now, we traveled to that hospital in Beersheba, which is one of the main cities in southern Israel, where we spoke to one of his sons, where we asked him how his father was doing after 11 months, or nearly 11 months in Hamas custody. And he said, by the grace of God, that his father was doing fine. We have seen some images of him in hospital, of al-Qadi saying that he has lost some weight but is doing fine. But of course, this is hugely important news in Israel, where so many families and so many Israelis are gripped by the plight of hostage families. But this, of course, comes at a time when negotiations are underway in Cairo, and there's just been no major breakthrough yet. And many are pressuring Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to agree to a deal with Hamas, which would see a ceasefire in Gaza and hostages released. But that deal has still not happened. John.
Imtiaz Tayeb in Tel Aviv for us. Thank you very much, Imtiaz. For more on this, let's bring in Jada Doyen McKenna. She is the CEO of Mercy Corps, a humanitarian organization providing aid to civilians in Gaza. Thank you so much for being with us. Jada, before we get to the specific issue of polio, can you just give us a brief overview of the humanitarian situation in Gaza?
The humanitarian situation in Gaza is dire, and it just continues to deteriorate. You have a population that has basically been without access to clean water, food, supplies, and for months, for almost a year now, extremely hot weather, a population that's been forced to move with their families several times over the past few months. There was just another evacuation order issued for places that they had been safely just over the weekend. And on top of that, even the zones that have been designated safe zones are continually bombed. We've seen bombings in hospitals and schools. But more importantly, it's been virtually impossible for humanitarian aid to get into Gaza for months, from security constraints to access to holdups at the border. It has been a dire situation, just an open sewage situation with lack of food, and a population that has been really depleted by this.
And so given that chaos, is it any surprise to you that there have been these polio numbers that have been reported?
No, it's not surprising at all. You know, polio is a highly contagious disease that is spread through mostly contaminated food and water. And the conditions in Gaza could not be more right for this. It's open sewage conditions everywhere. People are sleeping in tents outside in scorching heat. My colleagues have reported people, drinking contaminated water, having to wash clothes in water that they know is contaminated, on top of eating that, on top of that in systems that are not being adequately nourished. And the collapse of the health systems in terms of hospital bombings and not being functional for the past 9 to 12 months, you have a whole group of children that have been born in this period that have not had access to vaccines and no reliable ways to really even catch the disease or to catch the spread. I think the first case was just reported, but the UN was warning that this was on its way and had already been detected in sewage systems starting in July.
And how, given the conditions you've just described, how do health officials go about trying to deliver polio vaccinations? I mean, can you give us any sense of what it's like to try to carry that out in a war zone and as you say, where they've just recently been told to evacuate yet another time from one of the areas?
Yeah, the UNICEF and the other UN agencies have a tough job ahead of them, and if anyone can do it, I know they can. But I think there are three main things that really impact this. Fuel and electricity have been scarce to non-existent in Gaza. This is a vaccine that requires a cold chain of storage, so that keeping these doses safe and effective. Second, and most importantly, is we have to have access to the people. So these UN officials are going to have security guarantees from Israel that these facilities will not be bombed or will not, that the people will be safe in these schools which have been bombed before, to come and get these vaccines and have them available. And most importantly, we also, the UN is undergoing an intense public information campaign now, trying to give people awareness that the vaccine is here, who's eligible, but getting people to feel comfortable, to feel safe going to another location in the midst of a war zone, getting them to feel safe going to a location locations like that have been bombed or have not been safe. And also you're dealing with a population that has had to move several times. At this point, people are moving with nothing but the clothes on their backs, and in very depleted situations. It's going to be really tough. This is also a vaccine that requires 2 doses. So you're looking, you're looking for people to have to travel in unsafe, depleted conditions twice to make this work.
Jada Doyen McKenna, Mercy Corps CEO, thank you so much for being with us. A federal judge has temporarily blocked the Biden administration's plan to grant legal status to undocumented immigrant spouses of American citizens. The policy could offer an easier legal pathway to citizenship for about 500,000 people. 16 Republican-led states sued the Biden administration last week to block the government from approving applications, arguing the president needs congressional approval to implement such a policy. A Trump-appointed judge sided with those states Monday, temporarily pausing the process for thousands of migrant spouses while the district court considers the challenge. CBS News immigration and politics reporter Camilo Montoya Galvez joins me now. Camilo, remind us again of the administration policy and why Biden was pushing for it.
Hi, John. This is one of the major immigration actions that President Biden took in June. As you know, President Biden issued an executive order that has severely curtailed access to the U.S. asylum system along the U.S.-Mexico border, and that officials have credited for a sharp drop in illegal border crossings. But he also issued an executive order also in June that created this program that allows the unauthorized immigrant spouses of American citizens to apply for temporary legal status in the U.S. But perhaps more importantly, John, it also grants them a more streamlined process to get permanent residency and eventually, after a few years, U.S. citizenship under that sponsorship by their U.S. citizen spouse. Right now, John, anyone who marries a U.S. citizen, an immigrant who marries a U.S. citizen, is generally eligible to get a green card, but people who have entered the country illegally, including across the U.S.-Mexico border, usually have to go back to their home country and come back to the U.S. legally to get that green card. But in that process, they can actually trigger a 10 or 3-year ban from the U.S. because they have been here in the U.S. illegally for some time. That is a dilemma that is created by U.S. laws dating back to the 1990s. And so this program was designed to prevent that from happening and to allow these families to get permanent legal status without having to leave the country and potentially facing separation. And that is the Biden administration's argument, its main argument at least, for this policy, that it promotes family unity. But as you underscored, Texas and other Republican-controlled states are saying that this program rewards illegal immigration because it benefits people who are in the country illegally. And they also believe that the Humanitarian Parole Authority that the administration is citing to justify this program does not allow the president to create a categorical class-based program for hundreds of thousands of people who are in the country without legal status, John.
And so then briefly, what happens now in this case?
Well, Well, it's very important to note, John, that the judge in this case did not rule on the merits of the legal arguments presented by Texas and the other Republican-led states. Instead, he issued an administrative pause that prevents the Department of Homeland Security from approving any new applications under this policy for the time being for at least 2 weeks, 14 days. But he did suggest in his order, John, that he is likely to extend that pause on the policy through at least October. So there is a real possibility that this policy could be blocked through the election for the time being. New applicants can submit their applications, but the government is now barred from approving any cases. And so that is the status quo that the judge is preserving.
Let me ask you another item. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton has been conducting raids on the homes of members of a Latino civil rights group, LULAC. He says it's part of an investigation into potential voter fraud and non-citizens registering to vote. He hasn't yet provided any evidence that any of that is happening. LULAC, for its part, says the raids are an attempt at voter suppression to intimidate Latino voters. Remind us again about the criticality of the Latino vote and why these groups exist to help mobilize Latino voters.
Well, John, what I can tell you is that the Latino and Hispanic vote will be absolutely crucial and key in this election in November for president. They right now make up about 15% of the electorate overall. They are 36 million strong, and that is the largest non-white minority voting bloc in the U.S. That is compared to 7% of the electorate back in 2000. So the number of Latinos becoming eligible to vote because of naturalization or because they were born here to immigrant parents has increased sharply over the past few years. But it is also important to note, John, that they are also very much up for grabs in this election. Yes, in the past elections, President Obama, Hillary Clinton, and President Biden have won a majority of the Latino vote in the U.S., but that support has eroded, and former President Donald Trump believes that on issues like immigration and the economy, he can make even more inroads with the Latino community. So it is very much up for grabs.
Camila Montoya Galvez, thank you. Eager to get in, it'll be 4 years before Michael Sparks gets out. Sparks was the first rioter to enter the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. He was sentenced Tuesday to more than 4 years in prison for charges including obstruction of an official proceeding, civil disorder, and entering a restricted building. Prosecutors used his social media posts days before the attack on the Capitol to point to his motivations. Sparks had written, quote, "We want a civil war to be clear, and it's time to drag them out of Congress." Before sentencing, Sparks said he still believes the 2020 election was stolen. It was not. A single plastic water bottle can take more than 400 years to decompose in a landfill. A Houston program promises to avoid that outcome by making recycling easy. Does it? We'll separate the rubbish from the reality ahead. Plus, a report from New England where an extremely rare but dangerous mosquito-borne illness known as EEE has led to a fatality. You're streaming the Daily Report.
These are the stories
1, 2, 3, go!
of We the People.
We're trying to generate our own hope.
It's a huge deal.
I'm enabling them to feel valued.
Eye on America, weeknights on the CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail. What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides. Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
Exclusively on CBS News 24/7, the streaming home of CBS News.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
The city of Houston says it has a innovative new program that can recycle any type of plastic. It could be a model for the rest of the nation. The program is funded in large part by oil and plastic producers, including ExxonMobil. For a new CBS Reports documentary in collaboration with the nonprofit Inside Climate News, senior national and environmental correspondent Ben Tracy looks into whether these claims are too good to be true. Here's a preview.
Got to have the emergency water in the hurricane.
Starbucks cups.
Yeah, this was tomatoes.
Okay.
Americans use a staggering amount of plastic, yet less than 10% is recycled.
I know I can recycle my laundry bottles, water bottles, but what about plastic bags? What about plastic straws? What about these single-use items?
One company claims to have a solution to the plastic problem that it says can become a model for the nation.
Numbers 1 through 7 and the unmarked plastics, we can take them all. So that's basically all plastic. That's true.
But critics say the program is wishful thinking at best.
The only thing that's new here is industry trying to put a new spin on the old recycling myth and convince people that we can recycle plastics when we really can't.
CBS Reports and Inside Climate News look into whether the claims of this new plastic waste program sound too good to be true.
Is this just your industry trying to make consumers believe that plastic is recyclable so they'll keep buying more plastic?
Advanced recycling is real. It's happening. We're doing it.
And Ben joins us now from Los Angeles to talk more about this. So, Ben, what is this? What's the innovation here in this program?
So these companies call this advanced recycling. That's what the oil and gas industry calls it. They're also the same folks that make plastic because plastic is made from oil and gas. And the problem with plastic, John, is that most of it is not made to actually be recycled because it comes in all these different chemical varieties and combinations, and those are hard to break down and make into new products. But what these folks are now saying is that with advanced recycling, which basically uses chemicals or high heat or a combination of the both, that they can break plastic down to its molecular level and then turn it back into either new plastic products, or what they do in most cases is it becomes fuel. That can become things like gasoline that just gets burned out of your tailpipe, which of course creates greenhouse gas emissions, another environmental problem. So what they're trying to do there in Houston is collect a bunch of plastic and prove out that they can do this at scale, because critics have said that the industry has touted advanced recycling for decades, but never made good on the promises that this is actually going to tackle the crisis of plastic waste.
So that leads me to my next question, which is the program was announced 2 years ago. Of the plastic they've collected from the residents, how much of that has been put through this program?
The short answer is none. That plastic is all sitting there in that open air storage field, which you saw in the video there. And the reason for that, when we press them as to why this stuff hasn't been recycled nearly 2 years later, they say they're waiting for this kind of sorting and processing facility, kind of the middle step of this process, before Exxon can take that product and then put it through their system. So far, what Exxon has done at its plant, it has recycled, it says it's recycled about 60 million pounds of plastic waste, but that has not come from Houston households. That has come from industrial sources. So in Exxon's defense, they'll say, we are doing this, this is real, but they are not doing it from household waste, and they are not yet doing it on a scale that's going to have any real sort of impact on the plastic waste crisis.
So does that call into question, or what's the status then of the plans to expand the program beyond Houston?
Yeah, because, you know, as you mentioned at the top of this, that they hope this could become a model for the nation. And this company, Cyclix, which is creating that kind of middle step where they sort and process all this stuff, they want to open a bunch of facilities all around the country in major cities. And they think they can replicate this program that so far has not shown a lot of promise. And we should also mention that as this is all happening, the Attorney General of California is actually investigating Exxon. And in a quote, in a statement to CBS News, the Attorney General of California accuses the industry of a decades-long campaign of deception, perpetuating the myth that recycling can solve the plastics crisis. And the Attorney General is supposed to soon decide whether or not he's going to sue Exxon.
Ben Tracy in Los Angeles for us. Thank you so much, Ben. You can watch the new CBS Reports documentary, Advanced Recycling Does Big Plastics Idea Work? This Sunday night at 9:30 Eastern. You can also stream it anytime on the free CBS News app or on Paramount Plus. A top White House aide is in China. Coming up, what the Biden administration wants to get out of Jake Sullivan's trip to Beijing and what it will mean for the next administration. You're streaming the Daily Report.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate. Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes.
Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing or bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else. This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
You can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to the Daily Report. I'm John Dickerson. Here are some additions to our top stories. Israeli troops have rescued a hostage from Gaza in what they called a complex operation. 52-year-old Qaid Farhan al-Hadi was taken to the hospital in normal condition. He had been held by Hamas for more than 10 months after being abducted in the October 7th attack. Ukrainian President Zelensky said Tuesday he intends to present a peace plan to end the war with Russia to President Biden and his 2 possible successors, Vice President Harris and former President Trump. Ukraine has been fighting inside Russia in recent weeks, while Russia continues to launch missiles across Ukraine. Former President Trump has been re-indicted in special counsel Jack Smith's election interference case. Smith filed a superseding indictment Tuesday with narrowed allegations following the Supreme Court's landmark ruling on presidential power last month. White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan is in Beijing, where Tuesday he started a 3-day visit. He is the first national security advisor to visit China since Susan Rice in 2016 on behalf of the Obama administration. The goal, says Sullivan, is setting up lines of communication so that both countries don't stumble into a disaster just because of mixed signals.
President Biden has been very clear in his conversations with President Xi that he is committed to managing this important relationship responsibly, that we are working to ensure that competition does not veer into conflict, and that we find ways to work together where our interests align.
Isaac Stone-Fish joins me now. He's the CEO of Strategy Risks, a China-focused research firm. Good to have you here. Thanks for being here. A national security advisor makes a visit. Why is that different than, say, a Secretary of State?
This is much more focused on security concerns and the broad structure of the relationship. It's seen perhaps as more negative, a little bit closer to the military than just state, which has more of a diplomatic feeling.
Is the to-do list the same old to-do list? And even if it is, have the priorities switched in recent times?
Yes and no. We have fentanyl, we have reducing the temperature, but we also have, with Biden very much being a lame duck president, the idea that if they want to get something done, they have a very scant period of time to do it. So if he wants to put a historical method down on this, he's able to do that.
Just doing a little fix of the microphone there. If people at home think that we've decided to have this interview in a tin can, we have not. Let me ask you about that window closing because of the election. Does that mean there might be a possibility for some quick action? And would there be an area in which there might be a quick action before the outcome of the election might take place?
There is that possibility. I don't think it'll become public because any quick action will likely be positive towards the U.S. China relationship, which is very unpopular on both sides of the aisle right now. So if they have a, for lack of a better term, peace in our time type of agreement, the Democrats are going to get hit really hard by that. So there might be some sort of secret agreement that we don't hear about for years, if not longer.
Oh, wow. Let me ask you about electronic vehicles. Up in Canada, there is now a 100%, or they're thinking about imposing, they've announced a 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles, matching the United States. Why are both the United States and Canada so exercised about Chinese electronic vehicles?
Because they're doing very well in the United States and other global markets, and there's a lot of fears about unfair competition. And fairness in international affairs is a heady concept, but the idea being that there's so much state support in China for electronic vehicles, for battery, for other types of development, and that's harmful to U.S. and Canadian manufacturers, which really can't compete, with the exception of Tesla, which has a massive exposure to China.
And in terms of other tariffs, there's as you mentioned in the political context, there's a kind of a race to keep to talk about tariffs and more pressure on China. Is China responding in any way with respect to the United States in terms of saying, OK, you do this to us, we'll do this to you?
Beijing loves to respond in a non-symmetric way. And so that way they get plausible deniability, and they can harass Americans, they can harass American businesses, and not necessarily directly tie it to what the U.S. government is doing.
If you were, we've got a presidential election coming here. If you were asking a question of the people who want to be in office next time, the president, what's the most important or interesting question for a president for the next 4 years about China?
Will you go to war with China over Taiwan? And if not, why? And if why?
Yeah. Do you think the Chinese, what's their timeline in terms of pressing that question? Because the Taiwan question's been with us for, my lifetime. Is there something that is going to force this more in the near term?
My biggest fear is that Trump loses in November, says he wins. There's a contested election. There's a perception of chaos in the United States, and Beijing decides that's a great time to go in and invade Taiwan. There's no 2027. They have to invade by this time. We really have so little insight into what's going through Chairman Xi Jinping's mind. So it's possible that he wants to do this tomorrow, weeks, months, years, never. But there's enough heat, there's enough military presence that we have to be ready.
And what does that mean in terms of have to be ready? Well, I'll leave it at that. What does that mean in terms of having to be ready? And because that seems to lead to a whole different set of questions for the next presidential candidates.
There's major economic implications, but the real issue is A, Americans and American troops in Taiwan, B, TSMC, semiconductors, but C, do Americans want to live in the world's most powerful country, or do they want to yield that to China? And if they're comfortable being the second most powerful country in the world, then China can take Taiwan and the U.S. can remove itself from Asia. And if they're not, this is where this goes to roost.
Well, you've upped the stakes pretty considerably there. Isaac Stonefish, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
For the second day in a row, Russia fired a barrage of missiles and attacks at Ukraine. The Tuesday assault destroyed multiple infrastructure sites across the country. Ukraine says it used Western-supplied F-16 fighter jets to intercept some of the missiles. Abdu Rasulov, with our partners at the BBC, has more from Kyiv.
The Ukrainian Air Force says that overnight Moscow used more than 80 drones and a dozen missiles in order to target cities across Ukraine. And they said that they managed to intercept almost all drones and 5 missiles, which suggests that they failed to shoot down the remaining 5 missiles. And we know that one of those targets that they managed to hit was the hotel in the city of Kryvyi Rih, where at least 3 people were killed. And rescue operations are still continuing there, and emergency workers are trying to find another missing person at the site. And overall, the scale of today's attack was much smaller than yesterday's, when Russia launched more than 200 missiles and drones. But Ukraine still had to use almost all its resources in order to repel this attack. And today, President Zelensky has announced that Kyiv had to use newly arrived F-16 fighter jets in order to intercept some of those Russian missiles. And he also said that Ukraine has managed to design and successfully tested its first ballistic missile. So this shows you that Kyiv is trying to design and develop its own military technology. But of course, they're still heavily dependent on Western weapons. They keep telling their partners in the West that they need more missiles, they need more ammunition and tanks and air defense systems in order to protect its territory and retake all the territory that was seized by Russia in the east. And they keep insisting that its Western partners should lift all restrictions on the use of Western weapons. At the moment, Ukraine cannot use long-range missiles to hit deep inside Russia. And they want those restrictions to be lifted so that they can target airfields from where Russian bombers and fighter jets take off and target Ukrainian cities.
Abdu Rasulov with the BBC. Thank you. High-profile Los Angeles attorney Tom Girardi has been found guilty of wire fraud for embezzling at least $15 million from former clients. Girardi is most well known for his role in the case that inspired the 2000 Oscar-winning film Erin Brockovich, and for appearing on The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills with his now ex-wife, Erica Jane. Prosecutors say the 85-year-old, who has been disbarred, stole millions from 4 of his clients to keep up with his lavish lifestyle. Some of those clients were families of victims of the 2018 Lion Air crash that killed 189 people. Girardi has long denied the claims. Across the United States, school is about to be back in session for a number of students. When some of them return, they may notice restrictions on using their cell phones in the classroom. At least 12 states have passed laws, issued orders, or adopted rules to limit phone use among students during school hours. That's according to an analysis from the news organization Education Week. Florida was the first state to start cracking down on phones in schools last year. Supporters of the ban say phones can affect learning and that being constantly attached to screens can be harmful to mental health. But some argue that allowing phones puts students in immediate contact with parents in the case of an emergency, and that there are apps that can help supplement traditional lessons. The mission involving the first spacewalk conducted by a civilian crew has been put on hold. We'll explain why helium is causing another delay and when the launch will happen now. You're streaming the Daily Report.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail. What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides on CBS News 24/7.
Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7. That is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable. The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Now a follow-up to a story we first told you about on Monday. A person in New Hampshire has died after contracting a rare mosquito-borne illness, Eastern equine encephalitis. Louisa Moeller from our Boston station WBZ reports from Hampstead, New Hampshire.
His family says he was funny, smart, and driven,
But in 1 week, everything changed. 41-year-old Stephen Perry from Hampstead, New Hampshire, went to the hospital with a brain infection and died from Eastern equine encephalitis, or Triple E.
This is a small town, and the idea that somebody already died from this before we'd even heard anything really about it is pretty scary.
It's a rare virus transmitted by bites from infected mosquitoes. It can also cause severe brain damage and death.
Up to a third of people die from their disease, and then many of the people that recover end up having lifelong disabilities.
And while Hampstead already monitors its mosquitoes and may spray its sports fields, New Hampshire State epidemiologist Dr. Benjamin Chan says Granite State residents should assume the threat is everywhere.
The risk for these mosquito-transmitted infections, we believe, is statewide. We have a surveillance system in place to help identify infections or mosquito detections when we test. But testing doesn't occur statewide.
Which is why Chan says measures like avoiding the outdoors at dawn and dusk, wearing long sleeves and pants, and insect repellent, and removing standing water from your property are so important. In Massachusetts, the state will begin spraying to kill mosquitoes by air and truck in Plymouth and Worcester counties tonight. That's after a man in his 80s from Worcester County became the first person diagnosed with Triple E in the Commonwealth since 2020. Across the region, the message isn't panic, just protection.
Doesn't freak me out, but it concerns me.
Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson spoke exclusively with CBS News ahead of the release of her memoir, Lovely One. It's out next Tuesday. It's her first broadcast interview since joining the nation's high court in 2022. In the book, Justice Jackson talks about her path to the bench and gives insight into her decision-making on one of the most significant cases argued before the court, presidential immunity. CBS Evening News anchor and managing editor Norah O'Donnell asked her about her dissent in the landmark case, Trump versus the United States.
In your dissent, you wrote that the court declared for the first time in history that the most powerful official in the United States can, under circumstances yet to be fully determined, become a law unto himself. It sounds like a warning.
Well, I mean, that was my view of what the court determined.
You were concerned about broad immunity.
I was concerned about a system that appeared to provide immunity for one individual under one set of circumstances, when we have a criminal justice system that had ordinarily treated everyone the same.
Are you prepared that this election could end up before the Supreme Court?
As prepared as anyone can be. Let me ask you, are you prepared for all of the news cycles that you're getting as a result of this election?
No.
No, exactly. I mean, I think there are legal issues that arise out of the political process. And so the Supreme Court has to be prepared to respond if that should be necessary.
You can see more of Norah's interview with Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson this weekend on CBS Sunday Morning. It's a comeback 15 years in the making. Coming up, why Oasis fans will soon get a chance to hear Wonderwall live and in concert. You're streaming the Daily Report.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
I'm open to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday Morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Haitians are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
More than 1 million people here in New York City take a public bus every day. But the public transit system, the MTA, says riders are increasingly not paying for that bus that they're taking. Agency data shows about every other person who steps onto a public bus in New York City will not pay. Mostly they slip in through the back door. In 2022, bus fare evasion cost the MTA about $315 million. The union that represents New York City transportation workers says bus drivers are warned to avoid confrontations with riders refusing to pay. Other cities with large public transit systems have issues with this flaw in human behavior as well. By some estimates, 34% of bus riders in Washington, D.C. don't pay. In Chicago's public transit system, an estimated 51% of people evaded the bus fare in 2023. SpaceX delayed its Polaris Dawn launch for at least another day, this time due to a helium leak. The capsule carrying 4 private citizens is scheduled to launch Wednesday morning at the earliest. Barring any more hiccups, the mission includes a voyage of about 870 miles above the Earth and the first spacewalk conducted by a civilian crew. Helium leaks have been a recurring issue for space capsules, with Boeing's Starliner also enduring leak problems. CBS News space consultant Bill Harwood says helium is necessary for all launches. They force propellants into the engines in weightlessness, but leaks aren't uncommon due to the complexity of these rockets. Bill added that in SpaceX's case, the issue should be an easy fix. Motivational speaker is going out of his way to share a message of perseverance by breaking the world record for the most world records. David Rush currently holds 181 Guinness World Records, more than anyone else on the planet. Technically, his record is unofficial, as Guinness no longer monitors who tops the list for most records. But that hasn't stopped Rush. He achieved his 118th record by smashing vinyl records, one of the many unique records Rush owns. They include the fastest time anyone has high-fived a person blindfolded and the most bowling balls juggled at once. Rush is also recognized as the world's fastest and slowest juggler. There's only one band. He also apparently juggles blindfolded for a long time. Anyway, there's only one band in the United Kingdom that can say it owns the fastest selling British album in the first 7 days of its release. It's not the Beatles or the Rolling Stones. It's Oasis. That album, 1997's Be Here Now, sold 813,000 copies in the UK in its first full week. It was the third in a string of hit records from the widely popular group, led by brothers Liam and Noel Gallagher. Hits like Wonderwall and Champagne Supernova skyrocketed Oasis to global fame. But sold-out shows and adoring fans were not enough to salvage the tumultuous relationship between the two brothers. Marred by verbal and physical fights, public insults, and canceled shows, on August 28, 2009, Noel told fans he simply could not work with his brother Liam a day longer. Well, 5,487 and 78 days later, what many fans thought was impossible has in fact come true. Oasis announced Tuesday they will reunite for a long-awaited tour next July. Shows begin in the UK and Ireland with plans to go beyond Europe later next year if they behave themselves. The brothers offered these words for fans, quote, "The guns have fallen silent, the stars have aligned, the great wait is over. Come see, it will not be televised." Here's a look at some of the stories we're covering in our next hour. While Israel celebrates the rescue of a hostage in Gaza, Palestinians are facing a humanitarian crisis.
Okay, so let's just start at the beginning.
Well, let me start with this. What is at stake here?
What is the answer then?
Do you know why?
You want me to just keep going?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Were there death threats?
How is this possible?
What's wrong with that argument?
Are you saying they lied?
Have you told the government that?
Why won't you say the word crisis?
You're not answering my question.
Is that scary?
Does that make sense?
What do you mean? What does that mean in
Did any of that make sense?
What's your response?
What happened?
Why?
It's time for the CBS News Original 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
There is no more room in our city.
New York City is receiving record numbers of migrants.
Today, we're going to have more than 500 adults and children come through that door.
Tensions rise as shelters reach max capacity.
We don't have to take care of them.
CBS Reports goes inside a crisis cities and families are facing as they fight to survive.
The United States still has that glimmer of hope for people to come here.
Fighting for a future. Now streaming on the free CBS News app. An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Since you started La Soup in 2014, do you have any sense as to how much food you've rescued from the landfill?
We've rescued 4.5 million pounds.
I can't even fathom how much food that is.
And that's one little person in one little city in America. We're going to call this chicken piccata. We did 450 of these meals today.
This is the exact dish
Yep,
you and I are going to have.
Yep.
Oh, my God.
Is it good?
Mm-hmm.
Having a plan of how to keep people fed should be in every single city.
If we eliminated food waste, could we eliminate
hunger? Yes.
Eating Trash, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail.
What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides on CBS News 24/7.
Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
When people say who's first to get in the morning, that would be me. Morning news matters because it sets the tone for your day, and it's a way of getting you started.
Day to day, that first draft of history, it happens right here. We're going to uplift you. We're going to send you out your way. We take you places. We teach you new things. And we make you feel like, you know, it's not all bad.
People say to me, you always seem to be having a good time. And you know what? You're right.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
Okay, let's go.
You guys good?
Hey.
All right, we good?
Keep going.
The clock, it's ticking.
Off we go.
60 minutes. 60 minutes.
60 minutes. It's time for 60 Minutes, Sundays on CBS.
Welcome to the Daily Report for August 27th, 2024. I'm John Dickerson. Special counsel Jack Smith files a new indictment in the election subversion case against Donald Trump. A hostage rescue in Gaza by chance. But now a 52-year-old Bedouin man is home free with his children. We'll get an update on the latest on the deadlock process that denies other hostage families that kind of reunion. And we'll talk to Mercy Corps about the fears of a polio outbreak in Gaza. In Ukrainian skies, pilots fly U.S.-supplied F-16 warplanes in combat for the first time, intercepting